Hello and welcome back to the brand new Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Cities Skylines 2. In the previous video, we focused on transportation and mastered the basics of road building. But a complete transportation network affords residents the ability to travel without needing a car, which is why we're focusing on transit today. We'll begin by discussing transit hierarchy and then build a basic transit system that includes taxis, buses, and trams. We'll discuss proper stop spacing, transferring between modes, balancing routes, and external transit connections. And if you're excited to learn the basics of transit, hit the like button. And if you're looking forward to other topics such as harbors and airports, hit the like button for that too, and let me know what you want to learn about down in the comments. Or leave an emoji representing your favorite form of transportation for the sake of engagement. And without any further ado, let's jump right in. Before we start building, I'd like to discuss the concept of transit hierarchy. Very similar to roadways, modes of transit have different functions and capacities, and it's important that we understand how to categorize them so that we use them appropriately. At the very top of the hierarchy, you have airports and seaports, both of which are regional in nature. Beneath that, you have trains, which can be regional or connect cities within your map. Beneath that are subways, which are usually used to link up neighborhoods within large cities or large cities to their suburbs. Beneath that, we have trams, which are used to provide local service within large or medium-sized cities, or can be used for light rail to link a principal city to a suburb. Beneath that, we have buses, which are generally used for local transit, but can be used for express service or even regional service. And at the very bottom, we have taxis, which are generally the least expensive option and the first option a city would expect to see. Understanding this hierarchy will help us link these modes of transit together appropriately, ensure that we're not building duplicative service, and help us maximize ridership across all modes. In a modern sense, I could see taxis or buses being appropriate for a city the size of Newport. However, if this were a historical city, I could see trams being an integral part of the city's design. So with that in mind, let's begin building a taxi system. One of the very first and most basic forms of public transit that unlocks for us is taxis. Now, these are really nice because they're flexible, but they have a low capacity and they contribute to traffic just like a regular passenger vehicle would. You have the ability to unlock these after milestone 4, and you can find them underneath the transportation menu. Now, one thing you might be noticing is that we're already seeing taxis all over the place. You might think, I don't need to build a taxi depot. I've got taxis everywhere. These are taxis coming from other cities, dropping people off in our city, but they will not operate within the city. So if you want local taxi service, you must build the taxi depot. Now, the taxi depot does not generate a lot of noise or pollution, so we could build this basically anywhere. But the thing to know is it's going to dump a lot of traffic onto a road, and there will be continually vehicles going back and forth to it as maintenance occurs. So I want this to be in a fairly convenient location. So I'm thinking that we're going to place this fairly close to our road maintenance depot. And this has access to our highway, not just here, but also around this road to this location as well. We also have access to an arterial right here, Fairview Street, which turns into our couplet, which will allow us to get basically anywhere in the community. So I think that placing this over here is basically as good as it gets. Now, all that said, unlike our road maintenance depot, the taxi depot has both extensions and sub-buildings, so we need to give this one a little bit of extra space. Now, the taxi depot is going to cost us $14,000 per month in building upkeep, but do keep in mind that there are wages associated with this building as well for the drivers and the dispatchers. This will have 20 vehicles, so a fairly decent number of vehicles up front, but some of those extension buildings are actually to add more vehicles should we need them down the line. So we'll place that right here. And I know offhand that the Dale Highway has electricity, but we need to make a connection to our water and sewer. That's because this is a highway, it doesn't have it underneath. And that little connection right there will get this building operational. So now you might be thinking that this building is totally operational. We're paying for it. We've got 20 employees here, but none of the vehicles are in use. And the main reason for that is by default, without a dispatch center, you have to place either a taxi stand or a taxi shelter. The main difference between these is the comfort level, which ultimately relates to how many people will be attracted to take this mode of public transportation. Let's add one shelter, but before we do that, I want to point out that you can decide whether or not you want a European or a North American shelter. I want to place these near major destinations, or I want to place them near major residential areas. So I'm going to place it, we can kind of hit both of those in this downtown area. So I'll place it very near our park right here. And we'll place another one just off the couplet near our city service buildings. Now, the other thing that we could place is a sign, just a taxi stop. It is 1/4 as comfortable, meaning it won't be quite as attractive, but it will be a place where people can get picked up. So I'm going to place one of these right by our elementary school. And now I want to head back over to our depot and we'll see if taxis are being dispatched. We can already see some leaving, and we've got 12 of our 20 vehicles in use. Now let's say you want to take this up to the next level. We could add a dispatch center, and this will allow taxis to pick up passengers all over the city, not just at the dedicated taxi stands. Generally, I like to add this. It does say it's $6,000 per month, but do know that's only for the actual extension itself, not for the additional employees. And I want to say that this adds about 8. It does. It adds 8 employees. So that is a lot of additional wages. So do know that adding this building is very expensive. But for the flexibility, I think it's probably a good thing to add. Now you can see that 100% of our taxi vehicles are in use. We could add some garage extensions. This is $6,000 per month. It adds 5 vehicles, which means 5 additional employees as well. And this can be added anywhere within the building radius. So you could decide to have something like this, kind of make it feel a little bit more like a campus, or you can attach that to the side of the building here. It's really your call. I think this is how I will handle it here though. From my understanding, there are no limit to the number of taxi garage extensions that you can add, short of the radius that you have around here, so you could continue to add these. So think about that up front when you're picking your site for your taxi depot. Now, the other upgrade that we have is our electric taxi upgrade. This will reduce the amount of noise and pollution generated by the taxi service. So if that is a concern to you, this is an upgrade that you can add. It will cost $8,000 per month in building upkeep. And with that, our taxi system is completely set up. Couple more things though. If you want to see your ridership, pop into your info views and click on the transportation button. This will bring up your transportation info view where you can see your ridership. And we have 316 citizens per month utilizing our local taxi service. The other thing I wanted to bring up is why you might want to place shelters and stands even if you have your dispatch center. You can see that even though we have our dispatcher, a ton of people are here waiting for a taxi. And the main reason for that is that the stand is comfortable, which makes people want to utilize the service. So if you want to incentivize using a taxi, you're going to want to place those stands. It will make the service much more desirable. A couple more interesting things about this stand. If you want to relocate this, you can't. You can delete it though, going into your bulldozer icon, and then we can place a new one. And I'm going to try to place this in a place that makes the most sense. We were in the kind of blocking the entryway into this. So I'll place this right here instead. And then another thing I like to think about that can be a little bit tricky to work on is making sure that the bay here makes sense. You can see that right now, the bay is basically the entire block, which is pretty unreasonable. If you want to fix that, go to the type of road that you have right here. I have a 2-lane one-way road. And then what I'm going to do is double click and add a node. And that node will end your bay right there. So that is why we now have the grassy terrace and the tree restored in this location. You can do that on both sides. It's a little bit finicky, but we were able to make it look okay right here. And with our taxi service established, let's move on to building a bus system. Just like taxis, buses unlock at milestone 4, and as a result, you may be conflicted about which one you should build first. The taxi depot is going to cost exactly 1/2 in terms of operating cost that of the bus depot, and that's because it has half the number of employees, and the building maintenance is about half of that of the bus depot. A taxi service is also really easy to design. All you got to do is place a stop or a shelter near a major destination, or place a dispatch center and you're good to go. Now, the reason you might want to go with buses is that the capacity of a bus is 20 times higher than that of a taxi. That's right, a taxi can carry 4 people, a bus can carry 80. So if the biggest cost associated with establishing a transit service is the driver itself, it probably makes more sense to build a bus service over the long term. And having routes means that the service is more predictable, reliable, and you will have much more control over the service since it's not demand responsive. So let's do that. And the very first thing we need to do is build a bus depot. And very similar to the taxi depot, we're going to want to locate this near an arterial but not on it, and near a highway if at all possible. Now, we are rather space constrained in this area, and this depot is actually bigger than our taxi depot and has both sub-buildings and extensions. So we're going to want to reserve some space around this, so I don't think that we can place this right here. What I'm thinking is that we look closer to our landfill and start to build a little bit of a city service complex out here. Now, with that in mind, I am going to build a collector off from this arterial, and I'm going to use our alleyway to begin because I want to have one junction right here. And then I'm going to upgrade this one to a 2-lane road and turn off my snapping to zoning cell length so I can place this right in the center. Next, I want to start to urbanize this location, and for that, once again, I will turn off snap to zoning cell length, and using the replace tool, I'm just going to upgrade this up to this junction. Now I'm going to build an alleyway that I can place the bus depot off from, and I want to preserve some space for sub-buildings, so I'll send this back right about here. And looking at our bus depot, this is $150,000. The upkeep is $31,000 per month for the building. This generates both air and noise pollution, and because of the size of the building and the number of vehicles, we're going to have 40 employees here, so our wage cost is going to be fairly high. Now, I'm going to place this right about here for now and take a look at the radius around the building, and that's because we have 2 upgrades possible for this building. We have our electric bus maintenance upgrade. This will allow us to place bus routes that have electric buses, which generate less pollution and less noise. And this is an upgrade that only occurs one time. And then we also have our extra garage. Now we're likely going to place extra garages in the future. We're going to need this because they provide 10 additional vehicles. And right now we only have 25 potential buses at this bus depot. Now the electric bus maintenance upgrade occurs within the footprint of the building. The extra garages occur within a radius of the building. And the only limit to the number of extra garages you can place is how many you can fit within that building radius. And you see that we've placed this road basically perfect because we can go all the way around this facility and add extra garages if we want to. Now I'm not going to do any of that right now because we don't need them just yet. And we're going to be smart and only build things that we need when we need them. But at least we've given ourselves the ability to do so in the future. Now, while I'm thinking about this, I'm also going to add one more road out here. And the main reason for this road is to create that campus I was talking about, and we'll likely place other city services on this road in the future. So now that we built our depot, we are ready to start building routes. But before we do that, I want to talk about the overall design philosophy for transit in this city and the different types of networks that you could design in yours. For any fixed route service, and that's basically every transit service outside of taxis, you want to make sure that your route design links origins to destinations. Origins being where people live, to destinations, places they want to visit, places that they work, places that they go to school. If you're not doing this, the route will not be successful, or at least it shouldn't be. And that's because the route wouldn't be useful. In general, there are about 4 different ways that you could design your transit system. You could have a radial service, which is where you have a core destination that you're going to send all of your routes to and have all the routes emanate out from that one location. So for instance, we could place a bus station right here, have all the routes meet up here, and every other route go out in different directions from that destination. Second, you could establish cross-town routes. These would be routes where the buses follow one road and basically go back and forth on those roads. And then as you have those established throughout your city, you'd be able to have transfers occur at intersections. These can be really easy to navigate and provide lots of different ways to get around. And if you understand the roadway network of the city, you understand the bus system, which is why some cities go in this direction. Third, you could have direct connections. So think of this as like express routes between a downtown and a suburb, or between a densely populated area and an employment center. And fourth, you could have a circulator route, and these are ideal for places that aren't really supportive of transit otherwise. Imagine a route that circulates around a low-density suburb or around a spread-out business park. Now, in general, transit networks are usually made up of some combination of all of the different route designs that I just spoke of, though they'll lean on one specific design element more than others. Now, for Newport, what I'm thinking is we are going to have that mixture of radial service with a cross-town service. So for the cross-town service, we're going to focus on our major arterials, but rather than having buses, we're going to have trams. So Main Street right here down to Empire, we'll have a tram on that. And then Fairview and Coleridge, we will have a tram on that as well. And that will be our cross-town service. For our radial service, we're going to have everything meet right here. So that will include our trams, and we'll emanate out from there to provide our coverage routes in our neighborhoods and to our external connections. Because we have a radial element to our service, I want to create a bus station where we can pulse all of our service from and have a transfer in between our trams and our buses. And I think that this block right here of Fairview, Maine, Coleridge, and Vermont is ideal because we'll have tram service all over the place and we can have our buses meet here as well. So with that in mind, there are a couple of different ways that we could create this transfer facility. We could design something ourselves, creating roads and some surfaces, and really do something custom, or we could place one of our bus stations. So we've got 2 different options available here. We've got a small bus station. This is $100,000, has 3 platforms, and an upkeep of $14,000 per month for the building, as well as some wages. And then we have our large bus station. Now, the main differences between these are what you can add on to them after the fact. So for our bus station, it is much bigger up front. You can add extra platforms, electric bus recharging, and a taxi stop. And with our small bus station, we can add a taxi stop, extra platforms, and station services, which are basically commercial buildings that you can add on to make the place a little bit more comfortable. In terms of noise, the small bus station is less noisy, but the comfort is the same for both of them. Now, in this particular instance, as much as I like the large bus station, it just doesn't fit. This is a very large facility. In fact, you could see that we'd have to take out multiple blocks to make this work. The nice thing about the small bus station, not only is it half of the expense across the board, but it is much smaller. And I think we should be able to fit this very nicely right here, including some of our support facilities. Now, looking at this facility, it has 7 employees, so our wages cost almost as much as the maintenance of the building itself. We also have 3 upgrades that we can place here. The first is extra platforms. This occurs within the footprint of the building, and this costs $10,000. We also have a taxi stop, which is something that we might want to think about adding right away. This will facilitate transfers in between our taxi system and our bus system. This costs $3,500 per month, doesn't add any employees, and adds a little bit of noise to this facility. And then finally, we have station services, and these add to the comfort of the facility and will make this a more attractive option. And I keep talking about that attractiveness. That is a thing. And if we wanted this to be a more attractive facility for people to use, we could add these on. Now, these are extension buildings, so you might want to think about that when you're placing your bus station. And I think that I'm going to place these like this, and then we can extend our surfaces out to make this look more like a more cohesive unit. In addition to that, I'm going to move this entire facility, and I can do that by relocating this after clicking in the building, and it'll move everything. And I just attempted to center that a little bit better. And there we go. That's looking pretty darn good. And that's because I spent a little bit of extra time to make sure that I detailed this area, because this is a really prominent portion of the community. And even if you're not a detailer, I highly recommend picking your spots. If you know that a place is really important in your community, detail that, because it's a place that you're going to be looking at a lot. Now, one thing I ran into with this asset is that I couldn't stretch my surfaces underneath my assets, and that's because I placed the bus station on top of an existing grassy surface that I built a couple of episodes back. So if you're running into that sort of issue, that's probably the problem, and I had to just go ahead and delete the surface before I could stretch out the ones that were a part of the asset. But now that we've completed this, we are ready to start establishing some bus service. But reasonably, knowing that the tram is really the backbone of our entire transit system, I don't want to go overboard with buses. But there is one route that I want to build right away, and that is going to be a route to our outside connection. And that's because there's only one outside connection that we can reach with a bus. So to do that, we're going to go into our transportation menu, select our bus line tool, and draw a new route to that outside connection. So the first thing that we need to do is find a bus stop. So we've got one right here at our bus station. We'll click on that, and then I'm going to find that outside connection, which is way out here. We will click on this, and then we will find that stop to complete our route. And that's the exact same stop that we selected earlier. We'll click on that, and now our route has been established. So I like to do a couple of things after I establish a route. First and foremost, I want to look at the route to make sure that the routing makes sense. And you can see that it's not going down the arterials where I would expect the buses to be. Now, before I overreact and start adding a bunch of waypoints, I want to look at the road network. And you can see that the main problem is that right here on Main Street, we have a median. So we are blocking certain turning movements, and that's why we are doing a whole bunch of crazy circulation. So I want to go ahead, go into the medium roads, find the 4-lane road that doesn't have a median, and use the replace tool to replace that road. And then, because I don't want cars parking in front of the entryway into the bus facility, I'm going to add a wide sidewalk. And now I'll take a look at the bus route, and look at that. It looks a ton better. But still, let's take a look to make sure that we don't have any crazy stuff going on, because we do. We've got a weird little jaunt right here. For some reason, the bus is taking a right onto a local road before going back onto our arterial. So to fix this, I'll add a waypoint. So as long as I'm in my bus line tool, I can click and hold on the route and pull it to the street that I want it to go on. Then when I let go, you'll see that the bus route is now on that street. If I pull this onto the wrong street, I can right mouse click that waypoint and it'll remove it. Now let's say you want to add a bus stop to this route. You can do that as well. And I think even though the purpose of this route is to serve our outside connections, let's say we want to have a stop at our business park so that someone from the outside world could stop at our business park for employment. So we have to add either a bus stop sign or a shelter to accomplish this. The main difference between these is the comfort and the cost. So a bus stop sign costs $50, the shelter costs $400. The comfort of a bus stop sign is $10, the bus stop shelter is $40. Now remember, the comfort is going to relate to the desirability of bus service in your community. So if you want to make sure that you have a very desirable bus route, you might want to have a shelter. But for the sake of realism, I'm only going to add shelters when it makes sense because there's high ridership. So I'm going to start out with signs. And I'll place one stop right here and then another one on the opposite side of the road. Now, as it sits, someone would have to walk down the block to cross the street. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go back into my roads, and underneath road services, I'm going to add a crosswalk so that someone would be able to go from that bus stop and cross the road. And then the final thing I want to do is shorten up that bus bay. So I'll go back into my small roads and add a node. So that's just sliding around here and double clicking to add that node so that we shorten up that gigantic bus bay that we had right there. So now we just need to move our route to this street. So for that, we go back into our bus line tool, and it's just like adding a waypoint. So we select this and hold it, and we release on that bus stop sign. We'll do the exact same thing for the other side. And now once again, we have crazy routing, but this time it's because I have the waypoint here. So if I right mouse click that, we'll do the default, whatever the default is. And I don't love that either. So I will control both of these to make them go down this street. So we get back to our arterial. And then right here, I'll do the exact same thing, add a waypoint right there. And now the bus is doing exactly what I want it to do. But we aren't done with this line. I like to do a little bit more customizing. So I'll go into the public transportation overview and name this bus route. And this is going to Lake Valley. So I'll make this the Lake Valley Newport line. And then we can change the color of the line. And if we go into our line details right here, we can change everything from the ticket price to the number of vehicles that are assigned to the route to the schedule. Now, I do want to lower the ticket price. I'm going to turn this all the way down to 0 to make it free because it's our external connection. The main reason that I'm doing this is to allow homeless citizens to get on the bus for free to leave the community if that's what they want to do. This is a response to a bug that exists within the game at the time of recording, where homeless citizens will get stuck in your community. I'm also going to revise the number of vehicles that we have on the route. Currently, our line usage is 3%, and we have 8 vehicles here. So if we want to improve our line usage, we'll try to more closely align the number of vehicles that we have with the number of passengers that want to use the service. So I will bump this down to 4 as low as I can get it. And this is going to be helpful because it will open up vehicles for other routes and it will improve our line usage. We could also adjust the schedule to determine whether this runs all day or just part of the day. Right now it's running as a 24-hour line, but I could select a daytime line if I wanted this to be a daytime only line, or a nighttime line if that's what I wanted as well. For me, I find that it is a level of complication that is not necessary. So I usually keep most of my lines to be 24-hour lines. A couple of other interesting pieces of information that you can see here. You can see where each of your buses are, and these little dots on the bus actually correspond to the number of passengers on a given bus. So if you see a bus that has a whole bunch of these little dots, that means that there's a lot of passengers on that specific bus. Additionally, each of these little dots right here are the stops on your line, and that little center area right there corresponds to the number of people queued at that stop. So right here, there's no one queued. That's why there is no dot. Right here, there are 11 people queued, which is why there is a slightly larger dot. And if you want to zoom to any of these areas, all you've got to do is click on this. You will see that bus. You can click on this little focus mark, and that'll take you directly to that bus that we focused on our line. One final thing about the line tool is that if you want to change the color of the line before you establish your route, you can click on the color right here, and this will change the color of your new line before you start to create it. Now, I'm curious about what the utilization of this line is going to be, and it's really difficult to figure that out without letting it run for a while. So I'm going to change my simulation speed to maximum, and we'll see what our line usage looks like after a few minutes. And after letting this go for a few minutes, I can see that our line usage has jumped up to 39%, which honestly is pretty darn good considering we have one bus route. This will improve over time But when you have very little service, I think it's going to be very difficult to make this look any better unless you're hitting literally every destination in your city. Now, before we move on from talking about buses, there's one more thing I want to show you, and that is dedicated bus lanes. So if we wanted a dedicated public transportation lane, we can click on this option within our transportation menu, and there are two ways that we can use this. With the replace tool, we can add it to an existing road. So if we wanted to make this a bus-only road, click on that with the replace tool, and now this is a public transit-only road. Do know that service vehicles can use this, and cars will use it if it's the only option that's available. Right mouse click and it will remove that option. We can also add this to 4-lane roads, and it will take 2 lanes and turn them into public transit lanes. This might actually be valuable on this corridor down the line. It's just as simple as clicking on that and we get the dedicated public transit lanes. Right mouse click again and we will remove that option. We can also have a 1-way public transportation lane. This can be really valuable if you want a queue jumper. So let's say you have an intersection where you want a dedicated right-hand turn for a bus or a taxi. You can do that. You can add that dedicated movement right there, and it will give them the priority to do that. Or using the 1-way tool can allow you just to set it on one side of the road if that's something that you want to do. Now, for the time being, I think I'm going to hold back on adding any public transportation lanes, but we will add them after we add trams into our city. And now that we've established the bus service, let's move on to establishing our tram service. Trams are without a doubt my favorite form of public transportation in Cities Skylines too, and that's because of how flexible they are. If you want to run it as an urban service, add it to existing streets with frequent stops and you'll have a streetcar system. If you want to run it as a regional service, give it dedicated tracks, fewer stops, and link far-flung neighborhoods or communities on your map, and you'll have a light rail system. Or combine the two ideas like many cities do. And though they're not as flexible as buses because they have tracks, they also generate far fewer noxious externalities such as sound and air pollution while having 3 times the capacity. And though it lacks the capacity and speed of heavy rail, it's easier to retrofit because it doesn't require a huge rail yard, dedicated tracks, or a large and expensive train station, since you can have stops right on the side of the road if you want. But interestingly, trams are unique in that along with subways, they're the only types of transportation in the game that can only be used locally. That means you will not be able to have an outside connection with a tram, so it's not a complete replacement for buses. So let's build out our tram network. And the very first thing that we have to do is unlock trams. So we'll go underneath our progression menu and go underneath transportation. And we'll see that trams are located right here, gated behind trains. So we'll have to unlock trains first, that's 1 development point, and then trams second, that is 2 development points. And now we can find our trams in the transportation menu, and the 3rd tab is now open to us, which has all of our tram infrastructure. Now, very similar to buses and taxis, for trams we have to build a depot, but this depot is a little bit different than the other 2 depots that we've placed. First and foremost, it is very inexpensive. This one is 1/3 the cost of the bus depot and about $3,500 less than the taxi depot, but it only has a capacity of 10 vehicles and you can only expand this to 15 total. There's only 1 extension and no sub-buildings. There's also only 20 workers for this building, meaning that it's actually cheaper than the taxi depot, which is kind of fascinating. Now, as far as placement of the depot, I would recommend placing it very similar to the bus and the taxi depot. You want this located near a collector arterial, but not on the collector arterial. And you want this close to where your network is going to be, but not directly on your network. So with that in mind, I do think that we're going to place this at our transportation campus, considering we've already said that Main Street is going to be one of our tram networks, as well as the couplet right here. Now again, one final thing to keep in mind is that because this building is not very expandable, if we want to have more than 15 trams in the future, we may want to reserve additional space for additional depots, but I think that we're going to be happy with our 15 trams and just place that within this campus. Now, I like having a transportation campus because it makes it feel like the buses and the trams are being operated by the same operator, and they have a larger campus where they store and maintain all of their vehicles. Now, with that said, you can place this building in a number of ways. You could obviously place this right on the side of this local road that we stubbed in here. The problem with that is that all of the vehicles serving this building and the trams will all be on this road, and all of our buses will also be on this road. So I like to turn off snapping to roads and spin the building around, and rather than having the trams and all of the vehicular access on the same road, I'll place it like this. And apparently unlock milestone 7, which will give us some money, some development points, and some expansion permits. I think that's about it. Yeah, we get an increased loan limit and a policy that we'll go over at a later point in time. But coming back to our trams, the reason why I like to do this is we're now separating our trams from our vehicular access, our trams from our buses. And the other benefit is that I can spin this way and potentially have 3 signalized intersections in a row that won't conflict with one another. But before we add our tram track, I just want to level things out. Trams are rail. There's some special things about trams, like you can have really tight radii, but you should still have a relatively flat track. So we will slope this out, and then we'll select our tram track and run that right into here. Now, by selecting this tram track and using any tool besides replace, I'm able to create a dedicated tram track. But if I want to add tram tracks to the road, I will use the replace tool, and I'm able to add them to basically any road in the game besides alleyways and highways. So I could add this to a 2-lane road, a medium road, or even a large road. Now, for this, different roads respond in different ways. So for the 2-lane road, if I were to use the replace tool on this, it would just add tram tracks in the general purpose lane. Totally fine, but not what we're going to do here. If we were to add that to the 4-lane road, the medium road, without a median, it will add tram tracks to the outside, and you'll still have 4 lanes because it's adding the tram track to a general purpose lane. But if we were to add this to a 4-lane road with a median, it acts completely differently. So let's upgrade this segment of road to be a 4-lane road with a median, and then we'll use the replace tool to add the tram track to this. Now in its default state, you'll actually see that we lose a lane of general purpose traffic. And you can tell this by looking at the ghosted lanes on the road. You can see that this is now a left-hand turn lane. There's one straight, and that is also the right-hand turn lane. So this can actually be great because if you don't need 4 lanes on this road, this is a way to take this down and have dedicated transit. Alternatively, if you go back into your transportation menu and go underneath the road tab, you could decide to instead use the replace tool to add bus lanes over the top of your tram tracks. This will do something very similar. You're basically taking one of the lanes and dedicating it to transit only. Although it's not just trams, it's also taxis and buses. And in general, your general purpose traffic will then operate in this center lane. Now, which solution is best for you is based upon your personal preferences and the amount of traffic that you have. But there's one thing that may tip you towards this solution right here. And that is if we go back into the roads menu, underneath road services, and we grab the wide sidewalk, we can actually add a wide sidewalk to the center of the track right here. Now the benefit of this is twofold. First of all, you can now have loading in the center of this tram track, but also you can reverse trams if you have a sidewalk in the center. And this will actually happen when you add a tram stop in the center. And you can see that when I add the tram stop to the median, we actually get a cross track in the previous intersection. And this is how you can reverse a tram. Now in our case here, I really don't think that we need 4 lanes right now, and we already have the extra space reserved right here if we wanted to upgrade this to a large road in the future, which would have 4 general purpose lanes and then the dedicated tram track in the median. So what I think we're gonna do is actually go with having a median right here, dropping down to 2 general purpose travel lanes, and then we'll have the median where appropriate in the middle of the street. So I will remove our transit lanes right here. And then I'm going to add tram tracks up and down on the roads that we are going to have trams on. And now that we've placed all of our tram track, we can begin to replace the roads with the appropriate roads for what we want to accomplish. And again, for the most part, I think we'll go with our medium 4-lane divided road, and we'll upgrade that up and down. And the one segment that I am not upgrading is right here in front of our bus depot. And again, that is because of loading into our bus depot. And now that we've got our tram track all the way through here, let's add medians. And now we're finally ready to place our tram stops. Now, the interesting thing about tram stops is that we've got 2 different variants. We've got the EU tram stop and the North American tram stop. These are just signs. We don't actually have a shelter, which means that the comfort for a tram stop is always 10. So it is less comfortable than a bus shelter. We also don't have a station. So if you want something a little bit more formal, you're gonna have to build something yourself, and we are going to do that. But first things first, I'm gonna place some tram stops, and because we're running this like a streetcar, I want fairly frequent stops. Now, I want to have a reversing tram stop right here. So I'm just gonna place one right in the center. And I'm going to have stops every couple of blocks. Now, one unfortunate thing at this particular location is that we have a node right here, and this node means that we get a crossing track. So there's a couple of ways that we can handle this. Obviously, we could redraw this road. That would cause all these buildings to be demolished. Don't really want to do that. The other way that we can handle this is just to get rid of these tram stops and move it up a block. I think that that is probably what I'm going to do. In terms of overall accessibility, it's not going to change a ton, but it will prevent it from looking crazy like it looked right there. Now, interestingly, from a spacing standpoint, this might have actually worked out in our favor because I want to do something special right here. We're going to skip this one for now, and I'll go a couple blocks down, but we're going to come back to that. And I think I want to create something unique right here and maybe even call a bit of a mulligan on the little bit of a bus depot that we've created over here. Now, this is our first two routes right here. We're likely going to have one route that heads down this way and it ends at our bus depot, and another one that starts here and goes out this way. The main reason that I want it to have two separate routes is I think it's going to make the transferring easier here, not necessarily because I think it's the best route design. I think obviously a one-seat ride is better. It's just not going to work out with the way that we're going to design this. And that's because what I'm thinking we want to do is have kind of a turnaround right here. And that's because there's really not a great way to interface with this right now. I can't add the median through here, otherwise we prevent that left-hand turn. So the only solution I have is to either have people get off right here and on right here and have them cross the road. I don't love that. Or I could send a tram track right here in the middle of all this detailing and basically integrate it right into our bus terminal. And bluntly, I think that that's the best solution. So we're going to grab our tram track, and I'm just going to draw this out straight through here at a 90-degree angle, and it will let me get away with that. And then we can have stops right here and loop around, and this is where our trams will interface. And one of the fun things about trams is that unlike buses, trams open on both sides, so it doesn't matter what side of the tram we put the stop on. So we can put that right here. Now, I'm also noticing one other thing. I added some landscaping right here, and I just saw a taxi drive right through it. So let's modify this slightly. And there we go. Now we will have the ability to interface between taxis, buses, and trams right in this little facility. So with that in mind, I'm going to draw these routes before we establish our north-south route. So to do that, we'll activate our tram line tool, and we'll just add a stop right here and go up and down. And then as long as we select this one, we should be able to easily turn around. And that is our first tram line. We'll do the exact same thing over here. And there we go. Our lines are complete. Now, there are two things I think that we need to do before we move on from this. First and foremost, you'll notice that we've got this little symbol right here that says that tracks are not connected. And that's because we're turning around right here. So what I'm going to do is pop back into the transportation menu and right mouse click the track that I don't want when I have the one-way tram track selected. And then I can remove the track from that side of the road. And that immediately gets rid of that error. Now, the other thing that I think we need to do is go into our transportation menu in the info views and rename our routes because I forgot to do it. And nothing all that creative. We've made this the white line and the black line. And now I want to look at each of the lines because I just want to ask myself if the number of vehicles makes sense. And right now, I'm going to venture to say that it's too much. It's 2 vehicles, but it's a very short 2-kilometer line. So I'm going to turn this down to 1. We'll take a look at our utilization, and if it gets out of hand, we'll add a tram. But I don't want to overdo it right off the bat because we only have 10 trams. So if we throw too many trams at this, we'll run into a situation where we run out of trams. Also, we can run into a situation where we create traffic with our transit, which is not what we're trying to do. We could also adjust the ticket prices, but for now, I will leave it at its default levels. Now, for our couplet line, I think I'll just have 1 line. So we'll add a couple of quick stops to this. And that route is complete, so we'll get this one named. And again, for this one, I think we'll turn down the number of vehicles. Unfortunately, because of the length of this route, 3 kilometers, the fewest vehicles that we can have are 2 on this one. Now, I quite unfortunately had to have some of our tram tracks on the outside of the bus stop area, meaning that pedestrians are going to need to cross the road to get to our tram stop, at least from the purple line. So I want to improve safety here by controlling every facet of the road in this area. So first things first, I want to go underneath our road services and get rid of all the street parking in this area. This will shorten up our crosswalks and just in general make it a friendlier pedestrian environment. And we could add trees here, but we already have some at our depot, so I don't think I'll worry about that all that much. But we did remove a lot of parking, and I'm probably going to remove even more. And the way that I want to accommodate parking is to actually add paid parking. So this will kind of act as a park and ride. We'll add a small parking lot right here, and I'll even face it towards our bus station. So now, if you want to drive to the bus station, you have that option. We've got all this street parking, so I'm going to get rid of a ton of it. And while we're doing this, why don't we take a look at the rest of the tram network and just make sure that we don't have accidental parking. And there we go. And we can get away with some of this because we added a whole bunch of parking behind these buildings. And reasonably, we've added excellent transit access. So it's not the only way to get around. Driving is not the only way to get around. We'll make that less comfortable so more people want to take transit in this area. That's an actual strategy that planners use, making parking less desirable and making transit more desirable. And then the other thing that I want to do in this area is finish out this block. We've already started some work here. So what I think that we'll do is make this a bit of a special place. We're going to add a park right behind this parking lot. I'm going to turn off road snapping. And I think with this park, if I get it really nice and tight against the parking lot and center it in between the two roads, I can get it to extend like this and still be completely functional. And now I should be able to add commercial right here. And then because we've left this space in the front where there actually isn't a park, we can even add a bit of landscaping if we want to. And it's little things like this that make a place feel special to me. And just one quick look at the way that the trams are interacting with our bus depot, and you can see that it's working absolutely perfectly. Now, one thing I did want to point out, as we changed our line, you can see that it actually changes the color of the tram, which I think is a really fun detail. And now with our trams complete, let's maximize our ridership. There are 3 different things that we're going to do to maximize our transit ridership. First things first, we're going to add a bus route or two to serve areas that we're not really serving all that well with transit that would have a high transit demand. After that, I want to adjust all of our routes to make sure that the fares and the number of vehicles on the routes make sense. We'll also take a look at our taxi policy at that time to make sure that our base fare is high enough that not everyone decides to take a taxi. And then after that, we're going to take a look at our land use and do a bit of rezoning. And the main reason for that is we've probably overbuilt our transit a little bit, and it's had a significant influence on our land values. In fact, this is what the land values look like in this city before we added our trams, and this is what they look like now. Now, this is a phenomenon that happens in the real world as well. When you have a high quality form of mass transportation, such as a tram or a subway, you'll see the land values around the stops dramatically increase. Now, generally, planners will plan to rezone around these stations in anticipation of this to increase tax revenue and help offset the cost of this infrastructure. And we haven't done any of that. And as a result, we have single family homes with absolutely phenomenal transit access. And the result of that is that the land value is too high for the residents that are living there. So to resolve the issues that we're seeing here with high rent, we're just going to increase the density all the way along the Main Street corridor and likely along our couplet a bit as well. So first things first, let's add those new bus routes. And the very first thing I want to do is actually remove the stops that we have here on our regional route that stop in the industrial park. And the main reason for that is I want our routes to be very legible and for them to make sense. And having an arbitrary stop in the industrial park, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. And then from there, we're going to create one new route. And this route is going to go up to our industrial park from our transfer center and then go along our collector, loop back around, try not to mirror exactly what our tram network is doing because I don't want to cannibalize the tram route. And then we'll try to get back to our bus station. And then we're going to add a secondary route that basically does the exact same thing in the reverse direction. Now, the reason why I want to have service in both directions is that it makes the system much more legible, and it means that you're not going to sit on the bus longer than you have to. Now, to keep the speed of these routes up, I'm going to space things about every 4 blocks. And there we go. What this route's going to do is start at our transfer center. It's going to head towards this neighborhood, stop within the neighborhood twice on this collector. Then we'll go up to our industrial park. We'll have a stop here. Then we'll loop around this collector, have a couple of stops, give our transfer opportunity right here, loop through this part of the neighborhood, and then head right back to our bus station. And there you go. You can see that we can basically reach transit from anywhere in the core of the community in a couple of blocks. Now, there's only a couple places that we're not serving with fixed route transit. That includes our hillside here. The density is just not high enough. And then our farming areas, because reasonably, there's just not enough employment out there to make it make sense. Now, before we adjust our routes, I do want to name and recolor these lines. So I'm going to adjust the line color right here. And there we go. Now, the next thing I want to do is try to normalize the cost between all of our routes. And that's because right now it's cheaper to leave town than do anything else. So let's take a look at the 2 new routes that we put together. And I'm going to take the ticket price. And if we're running fare free out of town, I feel like we probably need fare free in town as well. So I've dropped the ticket price to free. This will incentivize people using transit, which to me, if you have this much transit in your community, it's a value of your community. So it would make sense to do this. We'll do the exact same thing for our tram lines. And then I want to adjust the cost of the taxis. And the way that you do that is to go under city information and city policies, and there is a taxi minimum fare policy. This is applied on top of whatever it costs for the taxi service itself. And if this isn't high enough, what you'll see is that people will prefer the taxi because it's a door-to-door service. They don't have to walk at all. So let's increase the minimum taxi fare. And I'll make this $25. And now the taxi service is going to be much less desirable than the other forms of transit. And that's because cost and comfort and trip length all go into that calculation of what makes a sim take a specific mode of transit over another. And now, reasonably, we need to simulate for a while and wait for things to shake out. And that's because the changes that we've just made aren't going to be reflected immediately. It's going to take a couple of hours in-game time for that to happen. So we'll speed things along for a couple of minutes. I've let this run for a while, and we've seen a sizable increase in the number of people taking fixed route transit, be it buses or trams. And I'm satisfied with what we're seeing, so I'm going to hold off on the simulation for just a moment. And what we're going to do is adjust our new routes. We have, 3% utilization and 2% utilization. Reasonably, that is a reflection of the size of our community. And the one thing I want to point out, we're seeing that we've got 10 passengers right now. It's 1 a.m. So if you ever see this, don't overreact. Take a look at those overriding numbers and make your decisions based on that, because time of day does influence ridership. All of that said, I don't think that we need 5 vehicles. I think that we could take all of our vehicles and lower them as low as we can go until we have more density. Now, as we have more density in our community and more ridership, once we start to see our usage bump up towards that 100%, we'd want to start to add buses at that point in time, or trams, or whatever mode of transit it is. And then the final thing that I want to do is a bit of rezoning. And I want to really focus on these areas that are experiencing high rent concerns. Because reasonably, the reason this is happening is we've got really high quality transit service that's raising the values of the land in this area. So we're just going to increase this by 1 level. So basically, I want all of these single family homes to become row homes. Maybe we'll add 1 low rent unit or 1 medium density unit closer to the water, but we can go just 1 level higher and it should solve most of our concerns. Now, I don't want to just spam these in here. I want to be thoughtful about it and plan for parking for these units, because row homes in particular will spawn a whole bunch of street parking because it doesn't have on-site parking. So let's be thoughtful about that as we place these. And as I've been adding all of these row homes, we've unlocked a new signature building, the Baltar Pines. And because we've unlocked that, I'm likely going to place it right away. And we can see that this building increases the well-being within 750 meters. In fact, we aren't even totally built out in this area. So I'll place this right here, right near Main Street, and it'll make it feel like there's been a little bit of redevelopment in this area. I like that. And there we go. We've increased the density quite considerably, but reasonably, I think we're going to continue to see these high rent concerns crop up in this area because it just has really high quality transit, and that's causing the land values to increase quite a bit. So if we want to maintain single family homes, we need to reduce the number of them that we have down here and then likely build outward. But ultimately, I want to see how this has impacted our transit ridership. And you can see that it's increased considerably. And with our ridership maximized, let's move on to a little bit of landscaping and detailing. The main thing I want to do right now is take a look at all of our streets to make sure that we've controlled them appropriately and have landscaping where we can. And where we can't, I want to make sure that we put landscaping on the outside of it because that will reduce the urban heat island effect in the real world, and in the game it just makes it look more reasonable and finished. We'll go through it, particularly on these islands right here, and make sure that we can't add any landscaping. If we can, you'll see it. If we can't, it's because we have a stop there. What I've done through here is remove a great deal of the street parking. Basically, any street that is touching Main has had its street parking removed where the density is higher. And this is kind of a nod to transit being the primary mode of transportation in this area. That's also why in the lower density areas, I didn't remove all of the street parking. And then the very last thing that I want to do is rethink this area just a little bit. And that's because I think some of the detailing didn't quite work. And also when we added the tram track right here, it gave us this strange parcel right here that we can't do anything with. So I'm going to try to fit some parking back here to serve these businesses. And there we go. I think that this is a little bit more fitting. As we add things in, we can't be afraid to call mulligans and revise your work. I mean, that's really what we've been doing the last little while, is calling mulligans, redeveloping, and changing things over time. It makes the city feel more organic and more real because that's what happens in the real world. Cities change. They're not static. It's not a snapshot in time. They're always evolving. And with all of that done, there's only one more thing left to do. That's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. Before we wrap things up for the day, I want to take one last look at our transit utilization, and we can see that we have a significant increase in our transit ridership. And one thing I'm really pleased to see is that the ridership is starting to move towards our tram system, which makes a lot of sense. It's incredibly direct, it has the most capacity, and we've increased the density around the tram line. And let's wrap up with one quick overview of our zoning just in case you are building along with me, as well as a quick overview of what our transit network looks like after this episode. And as a quick reminder, every single episode from this series is available on PDX Mods, so if you'd just rather check it out for yourself, I'll leave a link to the save in the video description. But for now, I think that we're going to leave it here, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I really want to thank you for your time today. There's a million things that you could have been doing. You decided to play Cities Skylines 2 with me, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.